Welcome to the Always On podcast. I am your host, Duncan MacPherson. And on this podcast, our objective is to empower our audience, which are very high caliber fee-for-service professionals, to always be working on their business and on themselves. And on today's podcast, I had a great conversation with a long-term client of Pareto Systems and a good friend, Chris Garcia. Chris is a private wealth advisor and Chief Executive Officer at Azimont Group, which is a private wealth advisory practice of Ameriprise Financial Services, LLC. And Chris is a serial entrepreneur. He's not just an advisor. He takes that seriously, of course, but he likes to run the business like a business, and he likes to work closely with business owners. So with that, we talked about the duality of how his technical ability is becoming more complex and how to decommoditize that, but also around the C-suite and being a CEO and wearing the many hats of running a growing and scalable business. So I hope you get some pearls of wisdom from this. If you like it, please like and share. And if you feel compelled, tell your colleagues. And of course, if you have any ideas for topics or guests, I'd love to hear about it. So just let us know. Okay, thanks for listening. Well, it's always great to have a long-term client of Pareto Systems to come on to the Always On podcast just to share some insights and innovations, especially with so much mileage in terms of our interactions between Pareto and Chris Garcia. Chris is a private wealth advisor, so he has his retail clients, but he's also a chief executive officer at his own business called Azimont Group, and he lives in Plano, Texas. Chris, thanks very much for being here. First thing I have to ask you, is that a real backdrop, those screens, or is that CGI? What is that?
Yeah, I'm not that tech savvy to put the CGI behind me, so I have to put the real thing. Yeah, so those are real.
That's pretty impressive. I'm sure people sit up straighter just walking in there going, wow, this is serious.
Yeah.
So, Chris, I want to talk about just the progression of leveling up, because you've been a financial professional now for over 20 years, and you've gone across the spectrum from just fixating on organic growth and being a really solid fiduciary for your retail clients, all the way across to running a business like a business. And I want to get into the weeds a little bit on that progression, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I'd like to hear your perspective, because it's fascinating, because as much as the industry is becoming commoditized around asset management, there's a duality of complexity, because being an asset manager, being a financial professional, especially for a sophisticated client, is getting quite complex. And then simultaneously, the complexity of wearing all these C-suite hats. So I want to talk about when you made that jump and just hear some of your perspectives on that, and then I'll pick your brain further as we get going.
Sure. So I started with Ameriprise, and the opportunity was for them to train me how to be an advisor, and then ultimately to own my own book, which that combination was square with what I was looking for. And I'm a process type of person. So I started out on my own, no real support for a long time. And knowing that the next evolution was to start to build in team members to help with the organization of the company, with the growth, with the process of seeing clients, I really took that focus on what I did day in and day out and built a system around it, a system that I could then teach to the next person, and then the next and the next. And really, that's where I started very early on in my career. And that has just morphed into the organization that it is today.
Yeah, terrific. And so from a technical ability perspective, in terms of your core competency, I'm hearing more and more advisors say that they've got clients that are starting to talk about things that they didn't talk about, talking about alternative investments, talking about crypto and blockchain, talking about precious metals. And I'm sure they're obviously sourcing that information. Somebody's planting those seeds. Either they're finding it themselves, or they're having conversations on the golf course where people are bringing things up. the writing's on the wall for a financial advisor. Why is this so important to be mindful of and to get out in front of?
Yeah, it's clients are becoming more sophisticated and they turn to us as their professional, as their advisor for the advice and guidance. Some just need to understand what cryptocurrency is or the difference between private investments in the alternative space. And so that's where first and foremost, being a good resource, a good person to turn to is the start. And then of course you've got clients that are more sophisticated. They've been in angel investments or private equity or other things. And they're looking again still for guidance on, does this fit my family's financial life, my financial plan? And so one, being knowledgeable about what's out there is key. Always being up to speed on where the latest trends or the latest investment opportunities are is critical for what I do. And so what I ultimately want to be is a good sounding board for clients on all of their interests. But yeah, I would agree. It's been a good evolution, especially with our clients, is that we almost are growing together, if you will, right? And staying ahead of the curve is critical.
Well, and again, you've always been completely bought into the notion of stewardship and transparency. And I've told this story before, but I was reminded of it recently. A financial advisor had gone through this exercise of reframing some of his best relationships, basically reintroducing himself and rejuvenating how they perceived and described and how they felt. And it just started with, let's counter loyalty fatigue. Let's really amp up our fee worthiness, and let's make it easy for clients to describe you to others. Okay, so that was the whole motivation. And he had gone through that. And he talked to a really substantial long-term client about his sounding board process. And sure enough, the client introduced a friend. And the friend, when he met the advisor for the first time, confided and said, I'm a little bit unsettled with my current advisor because my dad passed away and he had a substantial legacy and net worth. And turns out he had this huge collection of precious metals. And my advisor told me to sell it. And I can't get my head around that. So what are your thoughts? And this, a prospective client springing this on an advisor in the first 5 minutes. And the advisor's like, wow, I'm sorry for your loss. And I hear where you're coming from. And I don't know you, but I think if that's me, that's my dad. And that's something that was important to him. I'm a custodian for that. I'm not selling that. I'm going to keep that. And I'll probably distribute it to family members and honor his legacy. And he said he could literally see the eyes and the body language change immediately. And long story short, the prospective client said to the advisor, why wouldn't my advisor tell me that? Why was he so adamant about liquidating and investing? And our advisor just said, well, respectfully, I don't know him, but ultimately at the end of the day, he doesn't get paid to give that type of advice. I'm a fiduciary and our planning process is panoramic and all-encompassing. It takes into consideration a client's investments that are outside of what we manage because we want them to have the complete picture. Long story short, Chris, that's a client today, a substantial client. And the feedback back to the Rainmaker was like the Rainmaker, the original client who made the introduction, talked to the advisor later saying, hey, whatever you said, whatever you did, my friend is completely lit up. It's just so impressive, which obviously makes the advisor more referable in his eyes. So just being completely fee worthy, completely driven by stewardship. And I know you walk that talk daily.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I imagine, I can't speak for other professionals. And I think there's kind of two types of advisors. There's good ones and then there's bad ones. And so you always want to be on the good side, and a true fiduciary and a true comprehensive advisor is going to seek to understand what the why behind certain assets, if it's precious metals, and how do we steward that going forward. I love the idea of living your legacy versus passing your legacy. And what I mean by that is I'll have conversations with clients on, are we really focused on how much we're going to leave behind, or how are we helping that next generation today? one of my personal goals is to keep my kids close. I've seen this with other families where families will be in a neighborhood and they have bought houses for their siblings, their kids. And so they live in the same neighborhood or a couple of streets away where they can walk to the kid's house and see the grandkids. And so that's just an incredible way of like living your legacy to where you don't want to pass money on and then have them buy a better house in a nicer neighborhood or whatever the case is. You'd rather live the legacy now and enjoy that time with your family. And so, but to me, it's again, understanding what really drives us as individuals and how do we design a plan that is going to facilitate that dynamic.
Now, you talk about the quote unquote good and bad advisor by virtue of contrast, that those are generally self-evident. And on one side, you've got the moral compass component and the concept of stewardship. On the other side, you've got this concept of just adaptation and embracing innovation, as opposed to the inertia confidence that comes with just riding existing momentum, which is just a collision course with complacency and a plateau and everything else. So just talk about your mindset and approach to innovation, because I know you're serious about technology and efficiency and consistency. I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
Sure. Yeah, just like the screen behind me, I don't know if I could put up a digital backboard, but I utilize the screens that are behind me. And I am a good user of technology, and I really focus on embracing technology in a way that enhances relationships with clients. And I put originally, I think, one screen on my wall almost 15 or 18 years ago. And the feedback I got on that was transparency. A client would ask a question and I could pull it up right on the screen and go to answer that question without really kind of hiding something, if you will. If I was on a screen and then I turned it to just show them when I got to the place to answer the question, right? It was transparency. Your question is X. Let's go and find out, and I'll show you right in front of you. And that was eye-opening for me, is just seeing that feedback real time, and then moving to multiple monitors. So all of my conference rooms are set up with a quad, and I can throw things out into the different monitors and put things kind of side by side. That way, as I am focused on one topic, maybe there's something else that enhances that topic that I'm going to put on the side screen, and I'm not having to toggle back and forth. And so to me, that's critical, because it helps to make a complex process very simple. And so I did that here in my office, right? I look at so many different things at once, and sometimes I need to come back to another reference point. And so technology from a kind of a user perspective is what I've focused on.
Yeah, it's good. And again, I've known you a long time, and there's so many different knowledge for profit and fee for service professionals and sectors where there's a bit of a dynamic of sort of hiding, or there's an element of complexity, like lawyers and legalese, and just a bit of a behind the curtain dynamic. And then of course the whole concept of billable hours, and as opposed to being advisory, just the transparency, the open kitchen, so to speak, is such a powerful collaborative energy for a client to embrace. And I'm glad you were really a significant early adopter of that, if I remember correctly. But I want to ask you this. I want to pivot for a second to branding, because again, early adopters, the really enlightened advisors I've met over the years, understood professional contrast. And it wasn't just professional contrast with the people and all of their qualities and skills, but the practice and the process. You want a client to buy into the client experience provided by the practice and the directional clarity of the process. So talk to us a little bit about how you arrived at Azimont and branding your practice to create professional contrast. And let's talk about your process that really helps a client appreciate your technical ability fully.
So one of the first questions you asked me, I remember it distinctly, which was define your professional contrast. And I'm sure I gave you an answer, but it was something that I really couldn't answer. It's not that I didn't contrast, it's I couldn't put it into words, right? And so it took me honestly months, if not years, to really come back and solidify that answer. And a lot of it was branding, right? And so being able to tell our story, how do we work with you, Mr. and Mrs. Client? How can you perceive our value through our process? And so we came up with two distinct brands. The first was the Azimont Group. When I had been in a number of family offices, and just the immediate response or feeling that I got was it was very eerily similar to the feel of my office, right? The professionals working, whether it was accounting, the traders, the CEO or the admin, it just felt very natural to what I experienced day in and day out. And so I stuck with that theme and I said, what do we do for our clients? We help them to navigate the financial world, which is three-dimensional. When you think about all the different key areas and pillars of planning. And so I asked my marketing team, I said, help me to find a word that encompasses navigation. And what they came back to me with was Azimut, Azimut. And so I hadn't heard that word. I Googled it and came to learn that it's a directional route on how you find an object in the sky, or on the ocean, it's how you're navigating on a three-dimensional plane, which resonated. And I did a second search and then I found lots and lots of companies all over the country with that name in their title. So it wasn't as unique as I was hoping. And so I said, all right, well, let's stick with this as a root. Let's chop off the mut and make it Azimont, mont signifying the pinnacle of success or summiting a mountain, right? And when you are a mountain climber, right, you hire a Sherpa, and the Sherpa's job is really not to get you to the summit. The Sherpa's job is to get you back down the mountain, right? And so putting those two concepts together of helping our clients to financially navigate their world, not just getting them to a work optional lifestyle, but getting them through the rest of their financial life with success, is what the essence of the Azimont Group is. Now that's a story that we get to tell, right? It's that permission-based marketing, because everybody asks me, what is Azimont? And so I get to tell the story. And it's a word that we made up, so we were able to trademark it, and it's unique. And that's where, coming back to that ultimate question of contrast, professional contrast, right there alone, I believe the way that we brand is completely different from how a lot of other practices or firms brand in the industry. Then we created a second.
Okay, so hold that thought for a second, because I have to say, first of all, I got a tear in my eye hearing you use the language, tell the story, right? We all know facts tell, stories sell. There's an art to articulating value. And first of all, as you were describing the backstory, I could feel the energy and the authenticity of that. But I want to know, just from a practice perspective, your ability to verbalize that. Have you seen, now that you've got some mileage, the clients be able to internalize and then socialize that to somebody else with conviction? Have you seen that happen?
Yes. Now, not to the extent that I would want. So there's an opportunity now to reframe. We've introduced the name. We've introduced a lot of new things over the last 5 years. And so I'm now in a position to come back and reintroduce, reframe, and then really to make sure that our clients know that story, right? Because it's even a hard story to regurgitate easily. And so it's the opportunity now to come back and really harvest that concept.
Okay, excellent. Now, I also want to talk about other messengers within Azimont. So it's not just you as a messenger who's internalized and can articulate that messaging. I want to talk about how others represent the value. But now let's talk about the process, the brand within the brand, because I've been a broken record saying that you don't want a client buying individual things, making individual transactional decisions. You want them to buy into a fluid and dynamic approach that really amplifies the value of your planning. So talk to us about how you branded your process and how your clients have responded to that.
Yeah. And I had an individual that was referred to me that was looking for a specific product. And of course, as a fiduciary, I don't know whether that specific product is the right fit. And so I politely disengaged, saying, I don't know enough about you that I can feel comfortable just selling your product, because you're right. We look for clients, if we're going to have a long-term relationship, we're not asking them to buy anything. We want them to buy into our process. And so that process is key. And we created the second brand, which is the Centerline formula. And that all hinges around a reality that I've had over the last 20 years, driving back and forth from Dallas to San Antonio, which is where my folks live. And we can take two different paths to get there. So Interstate 35 is probably a little bit faster, or at least a straighter shot, but it's got traffic through Austin and construction. And if there's a car accident, there's a lot of things that can slow you down. And I would just sum that up as it's a stressful drive. So the second route we've got is to head outside of Fort Worth and catch country roads through the hill country all the way to San Antonio. So I obviously opt to go in that direction because we'll stop in some small towns for a pit stop. It's beautiful. The speed limit's 75 miles an hour. I'm doing at least 80, 85 comfortably. And we get there almost the same amount of time, but through a much less stressful road trip. And to sum that up for how we operate in our financial lives, we can go down that stressful route of life, right? Taking the shotgun approach. Am I doing the right thing in my financial plan? Or do I really plan out how to go down the easy route in life, right? And because of that, two dynamics, right? Getting to the same result is most people, when you think about that, and as I give that recommendation, if you're going to drive to San Antonio in Highway 281, you'll enjoy it, right? And that's how we want to operate with our clients. And so the branding message we created there was the center line of a 2-lane road, right? It is what keeps you in your lane. It lets you know when you can pass, right? As we drive down the road, we're in the hills, right? We may not be able to see around every bend, but we know that road's going to be there. And part of what we do at the Azimont Group is we become that center line for our clients, giving them that guidance, letting them know when they can pass traffic, when they need to stay in their lane. Because oftentimes when we hit volatility in the market, right, a lot of times we'll hear from folks saying, is this a time that I need to sell? And our feedback is no, right? We've got a game plan. We have a plan for volatility. We need to stay in our lane. Because if we make the wrong decision at the wrong time, we can severely alter our financial life. And I equate that to if I get out of my lane at the wrong time, I could crash. But if I make the wrong decision at the wrong time in my financial life, it may be something that I can't recover from. And so how critical is it for us as advisors to give that advice and to be that center line on the roadmap, if you will, or the journey for our clients to the destination point in their financial life? And so that's where, again, it's another story that we get to tell that really resonates, right? And it resonates back to how do we want to take this journey forward? Do we want to stress about things? Do we want to have anxiety? Or do we want to know that we've got the right process in place that's going to allow us to navigate through tough times, but to stay the course and to stay on track?
Well, and of course, the Centerline formula is a nice natural extension navigation to Azimont. So again, the brand within the brand fits beautifully.
Feeling like you've hit a plateau? Or maybe you're growing, but it's costing you time, energy, and clarity. At Pareto Systems, we've created the ultimate guide to financial advisor coaching. A no-fluff, insight-packed resource to help you assess if coaching is right for you. Whether you're just starting out, scaling up, or preparing to transition your business, this guide breaks down what to expect, what to avoid, and how to make the most of the process. Download it now. The link is in the description of this podcast. And now, back to the show.
It's fundamentally sound because, again, the transition away from transactional purchases to directional planning, getting a client to buy into where it's going and making those little mid-course corrections based on external forces and dependencies, that's great. But if they just feel like, okay, we're going from A to B, okay, where are we? And are we on track? It's very cool. Now, I'm constantly reminding advisors, like, what is it that a client can only get from you? It's not the commoditized products. It's your proprietary process. And so you want to keep imprinting and reinforcing that process is what actually drives the fulfillment of those individual decisions. Like, I'm not sure to what extent, Chris, in the last 5 years, alternative investments and you being more mindful of your clients' assets that are outside of your process currently. But if a client is bought into the fact that, look, if there's a liquidity event, if they monetize, then you have the process that will act around the fulfillment of addressing that when the time is right. I'd love your perspective on that. And then tell us about how big your team is, how many messengers are out there representing your value, because that becomes glue. That creates the consistency and the reinforcement of your brand identity. So if you could drill into that, that'd be great.
Sure. And back to that journey is that the other thing that I tell is that it's not my destination that we're headed to, right? It's yours, Mr. and Mrs. Klein. And we're not the ones behind the wheel. That's you guys. We're here for the guidance on how we get there. So back to your question on alternative investments. And before we get to that, I would say we have a lot of clients that come to us on even the smallest decisions, purchasing a car, buying a home. And so we want to make sure that we are in every one of those decisions to help clients set themselves up for success, right? Because when you start breaking down something that small as a car, purchasing a car, different interest rates, different terms, how much you put down, you really can see how much control you have in that. And that's such a small, minute piece of the puzzle. So that when you get to the house or to the alternative investments, right? We really have clients coming to us unsolicited, especially if it's something that comes to them from the golf course, from a buddy, that is a private investment. Our clients are seeking our counsel on that, just to have our input on it. Is this, we want your eyes on it. Is this the right thing for us? Does it fit with where we're going? And again, being a true fiduciary and through the planning process is we can be objective to say, here's what I would do. Because ultimately that's what our clients are looking for. Is this something that you would do? Would you put your money in this? And if you would do so, then I'm comfortable doing so. And so the process, getting that deep into our clients' lives is, I think, what sets us up to be in all of those different decisions. And so the team, we're up to 20 folks now, a couple of private wealth advisors like myself, 4 or 5 different other financial advisors, and then associate financial advisors and coordinators, client coordinators. And so we all sing the same tune and the same message, so that it may be one of my associate advisors that's helping to gather some of the information on a private investment or an alternative or the purchase of a new home, so that when we sit down together, a lot of that data has been pulled together and we've got that done through the process of how we engage with clients. So that when I sit down, it's really drilling into the heart of the question and where the financial decision comes into play. And again, that ability to have multiple folks on the team that are helping to, again, allow the client to move down the road of life, right? And make those decisions is part of the process. And we've got to be very organized in how we deliver that, so that it becomes a scalable process. And that's where we've got clients that just get referred to us because of how we operate, completely unsolicited. And so we want to provide that same experience for every client. And that's where the scalability comes into play.
Okay, I want to get into scaling in a second, but I want to reiterate. So you've got 20 people, all clearly defined and assigned in terms of the roles and responsibilities on the org chart, all underneath the Azimont practice and complete accountability in terms of where they fit in the delivery of the client experience, and then representing Azimont as being process driven and articulating the value around the centerline formula. And by the way, everybody, just a reminder, if you call your process a method, a process, a solution, a formula, it's a thing. Okay, now it's an actual thing that goes from the abstract to the conceptual. It's not promissory on performance or any specific outcome. It's just that you have thought this through. It's like a recipe It's a formula, especially in this world, as you deal with clients that are further up market, more complex, and they're still very much goals-based. Their goals and aspirations are evolving. You'll always be future pacing around getting out in front of those goals. So, Chris, you've got the people, 20 people, all within a very harmonious practice, deploying and articulating value that's process-driven. I should know this, but I can't remember. How many advisors within that 20? How many advisors have adopted and are drafting in behind the efficiency of the process now?
So including myself, 6.
Okay.
So 5 others.
And the 5 others, did you acquire their business? Did they just say, look, I like the way you roll. I think you can liberate me to be more efficient and consistent. So can I just work in your environment? Like, how did that work?
Yeah. So first one happened in COVID. We were in a different office, and Lynn and I were the only 2 people showing up to the office. And so it's more of a question of, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? Given the state of the affairs there. And that kind of just naturally brought us together in terms of seeking each other's advice in a COVID timeframe. And so that brought us together. She had wanted to sell a small portion of her book. And so I took that over, and with the thoughts that I would become her succession plan. And so that kind of started, that was the first initial acquisition or merger. And then I've just had other advisors reach out to me, the other 4 there, and really looking to just drop in behind what we're doing, seeing the success of the growth that we've got, seeing the brand, asking the question, what is Azimont? And so again, even telling that story to an advisor, it's the response I get is it's something that they've wanted to do. I wanted to do creating a brand. I've wanted to do videos. And so because we've built that playbook around how we operate in every facet, it makes more sense for a lot of advisors to just draft in, become part of the team.
So you've developed a reputational equity that extends beyond Plano and even Texas, of course. How did those advisors find you? Was it at a conference? Was it wholesalers? I mean, where did that all come together?
Yeah, most of it's just local folks that just know me, right? You know me at least through the Ameriprise network. And so that's primarily where it's come from. I've talked to a few folks outside of Ameriprise. And so I am starting to get traction there. And that's where some new conversations are starting to develop.
Okay. So this is what I want to do with the rest of our time here, because you've been working with us for a long time. There's 4 distinct sort of mile markers in terms of where we work with an advisory team. It generally starts with organically growing the business. So I want to talk about your current view on organic growth. Then it goes to generally teaming, which is building out the team and having a fit process for team members and culture, HR, all of that. And it shifts generally to scaling. If they're really ambitious and they want to keep going, they pivot from B to C to B to B. And then, of course, there's this whole approach to exiting. Enterprise value, maybe there's situations where transitioning from one firm to another, and just looking at through the lens of somebody who's thinking about winding down or thinking about selling, but you also focusing on your own continuity and succession plan. So I want to frame it in those 4 progressions. Let's go to growing. Any interesting insights on organic growth and growing up market?
Yeah, I've tried everything in the past, from marketing events and seminars and what have you. And some are successful, and most of the time it's a lot of effort and time with little result. And so what I've focused on is really the value of what we provide and to be the best advisor to our clients. And with that is bringing in just organic growth from referrals. And so that to me is my bread and butter. And I want to continue to focus on that because it's where we get a lot of our clients today. And I love the organic growth. The acquisition side of it, again, is just naturally coming. And so there's definitely an age gap out there, not enough young advisors. I'm in my mid 40s and I've probably got 20 years to go. My mid 60s is where my work optional lifestyle is designed to be. So So I've got a lot of time and again, the acquisition side of it is instrumental. I'm focused on that same dynamic. I had a client of mine who's my age asking me about my succession plan. And so I said, well, the good news is you don't have to worry about it for some time, but I love the question. And yes, we have a plan today. I am building in the younger advisor, the late 20s, the early 30s, fresh out of college. Maybe they're coming from another firm, because for this practice to live in perpetuity, just like any other advisor that's joining me, they want to make sure that they're leaving their clients in really good hands. I want the same. I would want to leave my clients, if I'm going to retire, in hands that are better than mine. What an uplift, right? To tell a client that, right? And then sit alongside the table with them. I'm going to be a part of this practice on the same side of the table as you now, because I want to enjoy my retirement. You can have that confidence that if I am going to continue my financial plans and my wealth management through the team that I've built, then you can have that same assurance. And so again, being that I'm mid-career, those things are already on my focus. We're already building the process and the plan for the natural succession to where the Azimont group will continue to exist well beyond me.
Okay, excellent. And so organic growth, growing up market, a lot of that just happens to, as your clients mature and you get introductions. Generally, I'm sure a lot of the introductions are people similar to the person who's actually making the introduction.
Yeah.
So that's great. Talk to us a little bit about teaming and wearing the hats of HR and trying to attract talent and some of those words of wisdom.
Sure. So going back to my original days of being very process and systematic, right? Designing a system that can handle scale when I started very early on. And that still is very well alive today. And so when I talk with an advisor that wants to join the team, a lot of the times I will learn a lot of things from that advisor, different techniques that maybe we haven't thought of. So we'll take stuff from really anywhere. We certainly vet it. Let's make sure that it's going to be something that if we're going to change our process, that it's going to be something we can implement and push across the organization. But I love the idea of going to a conference or talking with another advisor and learning from other folks, because I'll be the first to say I don't have all the right answers, but by putting it together through that type of a process of learning from other people, learning from our own mistakes is how we grow as individuals. And to me, that's instrumental. So as we look to bring the right person in, you mentioned fit. We definitely want to make sure that they've got a right fit, that they are somebody who takes that more fiduciary approach, that they are planning orientated, right? That they are objective in their advice, right? Because we want to continue to build that culture amongst everybody. And if it's not a good fit, then there's, I'm sure, another practice to join or another person to look to sell to. We're not all things to all people.
I'm sure a big part of culture over there is just everybody being heard, everybody being valued, contributing, and crowdsourcing information, and letting everybody chime in and provide their opinions and perspectives. Now, one of the best ways to ensure that happens is to have regularly scheduled team meetings, like not just firefighting, oh, we got to deal with an issue, but no, this is scheduled. It's as important as a client meeting. We do this every day. Tell us about your approach to maintaining culture and energy and buy-in with any best practices there with the team.
Sure. I would say in the team, development is key. I'm still developing. There's things I'm still learning. And so sharing some of the struggles that I had early on in my career with some of our younger folks to just help them to understand what it took for a lot of us to get there, I think is instrumental. But helping to engage them in a way to where we are developing them and we have a career path, right? Because what we don't want to do is keep our team stagnant, right? We want to create upward mobility, because if the organization is growing, we need more advisors. We need more associate financial advisors. We need more planning analysts, right? And so how do we do that? Well, we create an organization that lifts everybody up. And how do we do that? Well, to your point, we meet every morning, Monday morning, just to kick the week off. What were some successes for last week? What are some things that we're looking forward to this week? Oftentimes it's more about what we did over the weekend, but it brings that camaraderie together to just get our momentum and our minds focused in the right direction to kick off a Monday morning. Tuesdays, we have a classroom, we call it Azimont classroom. So we will bring in people from different parts of the industry, whether it's a Medicare specialist or alternative investments, to just constantly be learning. A lot of times it's us, me or my partners, presenting different concepts that we learned 20 years ago. And so, but that is part of the process of the development of the team, is making sure that we're moving ourselves forward. We're growing as a team, we're growing together. And that kind of goes back to that capacity of creating a continuity in the Azimont group well beyond me.
Yeah, that's excellent. Okay, I've got two more questions for you. The first one, I'd like to see if this actually applied in your reality. I had an advisor that was trying to scale up and was representing it, a few flaws in how he was positioning that and promoting it. And he did get introduced to a younger advisor who had not hit his stride, did not hit critical mass in terms of viability, sustainability, but was a solid person. And the lead advisor was really fixated on this protege being like a hunter-gatherer, like go out there and beat the bushes and drive some business. And I said, based on what I know, what you've told me about this protege, I don't know if that's his wiring. I think what you should do is accept the fact that he sees the merit in hooking his wagon up to you, but don't think of him as a sales machine. Think of him as a service machine. He will, the depth and breadth dynamic of adding him to your bench is service. Raise this service bar. You take some of the 80% of your clients and assign, don't hand them off to the protege. Your B clients are now his A clients, and just tell him to immerse, bombard, smother clients with service. See what happens. And then you go back to the 20%, you're now smaller client side, and tell them what you're doing, that you're going to go deeper with them because their needs are complex. So you're growing down, you're assigning and elevating a group of clients that are being somewhat neglected. And this protege, let's see what it reveals when he's liberated from having to go chase down business and just immerse himself in things that he's good at and that he loves. Chris, it was a multifaceted home run for this team. So I'd love your perspective on that. And I'm not sure if that has happened to some degree in your environment.
It absolutely has. And I see that around the industry where a lot of people will team together. The overall practice becomes bigger just by the nature of multiple advisors coming together, but they don't really focus on what you just described. And to me, you almost have to get out of this mindset of, well, these are my clients and these are yours. And here's the organization's clients, right? And let's make sure that we have the right person with the right client. And it's a true team approach. And so that definitely is happening where it's not necessarily we're passing off clients to some of the associate advisors, but the associate advisor is taking on more of a role in the service model, if you will, which allows me then to focus on the organization's growth and to come into the meetings where I need to come into them, right? It's my expertise is involved. And so now we get an opportunity where sometimes it's me meeting with the client and with the associate advisor, sometimes with Al, vice versa. And so to me, that's where we're able to deliver a higher value of service because we're able to meet with clients more often because of just the time constraint of me meeting with everybody or them meeting with everybody. And so it shifts things around. And now we look at the practice as a true business, to your point, is how do we make sure that we're still moving a market, we're still scaling, we're still growing. We have that internal org chart that allows for team members to accelerate and to move into different directions within the practice, because if it's truly upward moving, we need more and more folks over time. And it provides an awesome experience, not only for the clients, but for our team. And if our team members are happy and they are fulfilled, how much more does that translate and resonate into the service that we provide and the advice that we give? And that then just attracts more clients, right? It's a beautiful organization when you structure it in the right way.
Well, and in the marketplace in general, one of the perils of cheap money is that a lot of companies would rather buy a business than build it. So they'll go out and buy a business because the capital is inexpensive, but they're not committed to the relationship, which means they don't have high satisfaction, they don't have deep engagement, and they have zero advocacy that comes from that acquisition. So there's so many cautionary tales to that. And I think that definitely seeps into this business in some ways. But okay, so yeah, let me finish with a question that's actually two-pronged. First of all, you are a serial entrepreneur. You have matured and expanded your thinking around what it means to have an actual business and running a business like a business. Here's the two parts of the question. Number one, has that made you more relevant to the point of being indispensable to other entrepreneurs who are clients? Number one. And number two, you've identified some unmet needs that other financial advisors have that you feel you can address with software and other solutions and deliverables. I'd like your perspective on that. So first of all, the organic client, business owner, entrepreneur, do they confide and bare their souls to you a little bit more because of your perspective, and then into the unmet needs of the advisor?
Yes, absolutely. On that first question, is it helps to put me in a better position of giving guidance and guidance when I'm wearing those shoes, right? And walking in that path of what the business owner, the entrepreneur experiences. And so for sure, there's just a natural gravitation there. In fact, I had that gravitation of clients coming to me that were entrepreneurs even before I was truly an entrepreneur myself. And so it was just natural. And so, but it definitely has helped in how I give advice, how I shape the way to think about different things, different topics on how you operate and systematize, right? So going back to their business, I talk to my clients about how they run their systems. How do they focus on those systems? How do they grow and scale those systems? Because again, back to the big picture conversation is if their business can be more successful, then it creates more success for their own financial life and then for their children and their legacy. So absolutely, I think it's been an awesome experience and just living that, walking that walk and living that dream alongside my clients.
Let me pounce on that for a second, because I've got many advisors that have told me the same kind of thing. And the outcome of that relationship is that in the old days, a broker, when a client would hit their liquidity event, the client would feel, I've outgrown the broker and I'm going to go somewhere else. But when you're part of the journey and you've made yourself indispensable, they knock it out of the park. They have their exit and they're like, no, you were part of this, so I'm not going anywhere. You've seen that sort of outcome as well?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the other question, because you look at it through the lens of the advisor, but you've told me on many occasions that you've identified these unmet needs that advisors have that you would like to fulfill. So talk to us about some of that and how you're approaching it.
I look at how processes work, how the systems work, and my epiphany around that is to figure out how do we create a complex system or process? How do we make it simple? And there's a lot of friction, as I call it, out there in terms of how we engage, how we operate. You think about things like the cloud was, let's say 10 to 15 years old, but it's still evolving and we're still learning how to use it, right? How to use it, whether it's in our practice or in our personal lives. AI is now on the doorstep. And so the components are starting to come together to really get a lot of that friction out of the way and to create a more simplistic approach to a very complex set of dealings, right? Our financial lives. And so we have done that to an extent internally in a proprietary process and how we engage, how we pull together information. And we're now taking that piece of the puzzle and creating automation around it, right? Because our process is very mechanical. just simply because the software doesn't exist today. And so we're now taking that and creating automation around that, creating a more simple way to engage with clients in that holistic approach, utilizing the tools that are there today. It's AI. I look at the evolution of this industry as these tools come on, right? Is that it's going to create even more scalability, even more of an uplift in terms of how we engage, how we give advice, how we help to organize. And it's really, again, back to our contrast and how we create value is that's where things are going. You mentioned the world is becoming more commoditized, especially in the financial space around investments, right? So again, the future is going to be how do we create a better working relationship from the professional to the client, how do we enhance that relationship? So I don't want to talk more about it because we're currently working on it, but that is where I see major gaps. And again, being a serial entrepreneur is I'm looking to fill those gaps to just create less friction, to create a more simple way of organization around something that's so complex.
Well, the friction and the lack of efficiency is where the plateau and the drift occurs. And it's incredible when a financial advisor starts to feel the consistency and the efficiency of process, the growth and the freedom that comes where the business is serving their life and they get to look at the total life is pretty powerful. So if someone wants to get to know you better or touch base with you, pick your brain, what's the best way to find you?
Best way is probably email or LinkedIn. Just give me a shout, send me a message. Be happy to talk with anybody. But yeah, it's the biggest thing I see that is going to come of that is really going to be time back. Right. If we have more time back to engage at a deeper level, that's the why behind what we're doing in terms of filling some of these gaps in the software world.
Yeah, perfect. Well, I know, you are an advisor to advisors, and I know you wear that proudly, but you tell us to take it seriously. So if anybody wants just another perspective on the industry and where it's going and where some little tweaks and refinements might be, Chris would be a good guy to talk to. So Chris, say hi to the team for me and hopefully we can cross paths soon, but I really appreciate your time and we'll have you back sometime soon, maybe when that software is ready for prime time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Duncan.
Thank you for listening to Always On with Duncan MacPherson, where our objective is to enable professionals to always be working on their business and on themselves. Want to learn more about Duncan and his team? Visit ParetoSystems.com. Don't forget to click the follow button below to be notified when new episodes become available. The information covered and posted represents the views and opinions of the hosts and/or guests and does not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Pareto Systems. The content has been made available for informational and educational purposes only.